Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this edition of the GoOn webinar series. It seems like there are a few people who are going to be joining us over the next few minutes, but I think we'll go ahead and get started now. My name is Michael Aquafreda. I'm a postdoctoral researcher with the NOAA Ocean Acidification Program, and I'll be moderating today's webinar today. This webinar series has 4 sponsoring organizations. First, GoOn, the Global OA Observing Network. Second, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Third, the IAEA, OAICC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center. And last but not least, the IOC UNESCO, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. For those of you who are new to GoOn, it is a collaborative international network designed to detect and understand the drivers of ocean acidification and the resulting impacts on marine ecosystems. GoOn serves as a platform for acquiring and exchanging data and knowledge necessary to optimize modeling studies, and GoOn provides key input to communities, industries, governments, and global organizations who are seeking to develop action plans, best practices, and mitigation and adaptation strategies to address the impacts of OA. GoOn has over 800 members from over 105 countries. We welcome any member of this webinar who isn't affiliated with GoOn to please join us by going to goon.org. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. You are welcome to type in any questions you have into the questions box, which can be found on the bottom of the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We do ask that you specify your name when you are asking your question. And I will be moderating the questions as they come in, and we have a question and answer session at the end of this presentation. We encourage you to post questions on the Ocean Acidification Information Exchange as well, and on Twitter using the hashtag GoOnWS. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available through the GoOn YouTube channel. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Kristina Barclay. Dr. Kristina Barclay is a postdoctoral associate at the University of Calgary and joined the Marine Environmental Observation, Prediction, and Response Network, or MEOPAR, OA Community of Practice in October 2020 as their new coordinator. She received her PhD from the University of Alberta, where she studied the effects of ocean acidification on marine snails and their relationships with shell-crushing crab predators through time. Kristina hopes to bring her background in OA research and science, outreach, and communication to continue to mobilize and engage the MEOPAR OA community of practice. At this time, I would like to pass it over to Kristina. So, Kristina, I am making you the presenter. And you can take it away.
All right, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you see my
loud
screen?
and clear. Yes, we see your PowerPoint kind of in the normal PowerPoint view.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right. So thank you very
That's
much,
great.
Mike, for that introduction. Yeah, it's a tough act to follow. There's been some amazing webinars already for this MEOPAR, or sorry, this GoOn webinar series. So thank you very much for inviting me to participate. So I'm just going to turn off my video for now so that you can just focus on the screen here. But yeah, so today I want to chat with you a little bit about Canada's ocean acidification community of practice. But before I get started, I would just like to take this time to acknowledge I am speaking to you today from Calgary, Alberta. And this is the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. All right, so I'm sure this is familiar to most people in the audience, but in case we have any newcomers today, I always like to do a little introduction on what OA actually is and some of the basics. So OA is often described as the other CO2 problem. the other consequence of carbon dioxide emissions. So basically, as carbon dioxide emissions increase, about 25 to 30% of those have already been absorbed by our oceans. And when CO2 is absorbed in the oceans, basically this leads to a chemical reaction, and one of the end products of this is an excess of hydrogen ions. And these hydrogen ions do a couple of things. First, they drive down the pH, so we see a lowering of global pHs, and that basically is where the term ocean acidification comes from. But the other thing too is that hydrogen ions bond really readily with carbonate ions that are naturally found in seawater. And the critical thing here being that these carbonate ions are a building block for many shell-building organisms that live in the ocean. So if we're thinking of things like shellfish and commercially important species in Canada, these organisms are naturally vulnerable to things like ocean acidification. So already on the west coast of North America, we're starting to see these mass mortality events of shellfish species. And there has quite a bit of evidence to suggest that this is potentially linked to things like ocean acidification. So for anyone who might not be familiar with Canadian geography, I'm just going to orient you a little bit. So there are several unique challenges that we face with respect to ocean acidification in Canada. And first of all, well, we are a big country, and we have these three ocean basins. So we've got the Pacific, the Arctic, as well as the Atlantic, that have unique oceanographic properties and vulnerabilities with respect to ocean acidification, but they're also connected. And then we also have important areas for commercial shipping as well as fishing, so areas like the Labrador Sea as well as the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Now I'll just put in a plug for this video. The audio won't work properly today, but this is a really great video that is done by Fisheries and Oceans Canada. It's about a 2.5 minute video, so I encourage everybody to check it out. And it just walks through some of the unique challenges that we face in Canada with respect to ocean acidification. And it's just really, really well done. So I always like to put a plug in for this video. So please go check it out. We'll put the links in the chat here. I'm gonna skip the video though, but just to highlight some of the things that are discussed in this video, some take-home messages are some of the challenges that we face in Canada. First of all are, well, we have the largest coastline of any country in the world, so that's a lot to manage and monitor, and a lot of potential vulnerability to things like ocean acidification. We also have a vulnerable Arctic. There's a lot of freshwater input from things like melting sea ice and basically increasing temperatures that increase the vulnerability of the Arctic due to things like freshwater input. The Pacific is also naturally vulnerable just because of natural upwelling that occurs along the west coast of North America. So we've got these seasonal upwelling that brings these naturally acidic waters up to the surface, and that can exacerbate any existing OA that is occurring. We're also naturally vulnerable in Canada, just given our latitude. So because of our high latitude, we have typically colder waters, and carbonates are more soluble in colder waters. So our saturation states of aragonite are a little bit naturally lower. So OA can exacerbate that. Also, because we are such a large country and we have such a large coastline, there are a lot of vulnerable coastal communities. So if you're thinking about regions like Atlantic Canada that are dependent on aquaculture and fisheries, that can bring a lot of vulnerability in, and that's something that we are trying to address and be aware of when we're thinking about things like ocean acidification. So for those of you who have seen me post on places like the OA Information Exchange, you'll probably have seen me post as the MEOPAR Ocean Acidification Community of Practice. So we are within this larger organization. So it's called the Marine Environmental Observation Prediction and Response Network. And it's a federally funded program through the networks of centers of excellence in Canada. So it's a very large organization, and within MEOPAR, we're just one small part, but there are several communities of practice, and they are all part of this knowledge mobilization and integration initiatives that MEOPAR has. And these communities of practice are designed to connect interdisciplinary groups that are focused on a common issue. So in our case, it's ocean acidification. The other challenge is to foster best practices, especially with respect to community science and data gathering. Another goal is to identify national knowledge gaps in areas for priority research within Canada. So our community of practice, the OA-COP, was initiated in 2018, and that started with bringing on 2 co-leads, one from academia and one from DFO from government science. And then an interdisciplinary steering committee was formed that with people that all have different backgrounds with respect to ocean acidification. And then in the fall of 2018, a coordinator was brought on to be the facilitator and coordinate our daily activities. And so I am the second of the coordinators. So within our community of practice, our overarching goals are to coordinate across sectors, disciplines, and regions to share OA expertise and data and really build that communication network between all these different groups that are potentially affected by OA and as well create OA. Data and knowledge. So the other thing is, of course, we want to identify pressing needs for OA research and knowledge. And we really want to create a collaborative and supportive environment for groups affected by ocean acidification. So the goal, you know, we basically are a service. We want to provide that sense of real community and foster that community and provide a benefit to Canadians and groups that are affected by ocean acidification in Canada. So more specifically, we have several terms of reference that we are sort of our action items and goals that we are working towards. So the first is to develop linkages between end users and creators of OA data. So really trying to create that pipeline of knowledge and transfer of knowledge. We also want to foster best practices for OA research and data collection, particularly when it comes to things like community science data gathering. So again, looking to other groups that have already done this and sort of building off some of the ideas that other international OA groups have done. And related to this is as well data sharing networks and standards and making sure that data is accessible and usable as much as possible. So again, we're trying to tap into some of those larger international networks to help leverage some of those activities. We also want to develop regional hubs for OA research activities. We recognize that, you know, we're a big country and individuals on the West Coast might not have the same concerns as people in the Arctic or in the Atlantic. So we're trying to develop some regional activities and regional hubs. Some of these activities have been delayed just due to COVID, but we have had a couple of activities that I'll discuss in a bit here. We're also working to develop a list of ongoing OA research and infrastructure that's happening and exists across the country. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit as well. So I just wanted to put this up here so you can see some of these faces for, I'm sure some people are familiar with these names already, but this is our leadership team for our community of practice. So as I mentioned, we have 2 co-leads that were brought on. So first we have Brent Else, who is an associate professor at the University of Calgary, and he specializes in chemical oceanography and marine carbonate chemistry in the Arctic regions. We have Helen Gurney-Smith, who is a research scientist in the biological effects sections of fisheries and oceans, so DFO. She specializes in biological effects and of climate change and OA on marine organisms and their ecosystems, including things like lobsters in the Atlantic, but she also has expertise in shellfish in Pacific regions as well. So those are our 2 co-leads. And then there's myself. I am the coordinator, and I'm a postdoc at the University of Calgary. And my role as a postdoc is to be the coordinator for this group. And my specializations are paleoecology, and looking at the effects of OA on predator-prey interactions in marine invertebrates. And I also have a bit of a background in science communication and outreach. Then for our steering committee, so these are the people that help guide our activities. We have Piero Colosi, who is a professor at the University of Quebec. He specializes in invertebrate physiology, life history responses, as well as adaptation potential of organisms in the context of global change. Kamiko Azusa-Scott is also with DFO. She's a research scientist at the Bedford Institute of Oceanography, and she's also an adjunct at Dalhousie University. And she specializes in climate change and carbon cycles, as well as ocean acidification in both the North Atlantic as well as the Arctic. Wiley Evans is a research scientist and the OA lab manager at the Hakai Institute in British Columbia, so Pacific side, and he specializes in ocean chemistry, and he's an important member of international ocean monitoring efforts both in BC as well as the North Pacific. Then we have Denise Joy, who is the manager of ocean and climate change science with DFO, and she also co-leads the DFO joint DFO-NOAA ocean acidification working group. So it's really important to have her leadership experience and expertise. Then we have Jim Russell, who is our industry expert. He is the executive director of the BC Shellfish Growers Association and brings many years of experience in the industry. So he's been both a finfish and a shellfish farmer. And he's also been a shellfish biologist, the director of aquaculture, and the director of strategic seafood initiatives for the province of British Columbia. And then later in 2020, the steering committee and the co-leads decided that it would be worthwhile to create a student representative position on the steering committee to have that early career voice and representation on the steering committee. And so Patrick Duke was brought on to be our student representative. And he is currently a PhD student at the University of Victoria with Roberta Ham and Debbie Ianson as part of Canada's Marine Carbon Cohort. And so he specializes in ocean acidification sensors, as well as air-sea carbon fluxes in both the Arctic and the Northeast Pacific. And so you can see we're a pretty interdisciplinary group. We do have a couple of positions on the steering committee that we're hoping to fill to sort of round out this group as well. So stay tuned. So one thing I'll just mention briefly, sort of the first and foremost action as a community of practice was to create a website. So oceanacidification.ca, pretty straightforward for people to find. So the idea with this website is that it's our main resource. It's our main hub for finding resources related to ocean acidification in Canada. So it's very much a work in progress, but it was a big effort to try and create a website. So we're hoping to continue to add to this and build on our resources there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. One of the other first things that was done was to form Team Canada on the Ocean Acidification Information Exchange. So we encourage all of our members to join Team Canada. And again, as many people are probably familiar with, this is a great way for people to have discussions and conversations, ask questions related to ocean acidification. And so not only is it a place for us to share information pertaining to Canada, but it's also a place for our members to be able to connect into that larger global ocean acidification community and see some of those discussions. So for example, there's been really great discussions lately about CRMs. And so it's nice for our Canadian members to be able to see some of these conversations and contribute. One other really important thing that we do is that we help act as the Canadian leads for the GoOn North American Regional Hub. So this is a nice alignment because basically the community of practice, our goals align very much with GoOn's goals. So things like documenting and monitoring ocean acidification, understanding impacts, especially biological impacts of ocean acidification, as well as allowing us to have some capacity building and collaborations. And so this has been a really great way for us to link in with the other North American countries. And there's been some great collaborations that have come out of this. So we've got the DFO-NOAA Joint Ocean Acidification Working Groups. But at these meetings, there's also been great discussions about things like biological responses. And there's been some really cool research that's come out recently that has been a direct result of these collaborative efforts, looking at things like biological responses. as well as measuring ocean acidification in places like the North Pacific as well as the Arctic. So we really enjoy being part of the GoOn North American Regional Hub. So initially when the community was started, it was sort of by invitation. We basically just made a list of people we thought would be interested in being part of our community and sent them an invitation, asking them to join us. And then the other thing that we did was to create a newsletter. So this is a quarterly newsletter that we put out that's got some updates, and will keep everyone across the country kind of connected and updated with respect to OA news and updates on our activities. So those were two of our initial big things that we did and that we still continue to do. We've had a few awesome past workshops and webinars, including this MEOPAR. Basically, there was an OA workshop that was held in conjunction with the MEOPAR annual scientific meeting in 2019, so pre-pandemic. And this was great. We got some summaries of government OA monitoring and assessment that's happening in the Arctic. We got to learn about instrument development for OA sensors, as well as tips and tricks for how to develop industry partnerships, as well as solutions for coastal communities and stakeholders with respect to OA. Another one of our more regional activities that we did pre-pandemic was to host a workshop in BC. So the Baines Sound Environmental Intelligence Collaborative Workshop was basically held to address some of the threats facing the shellfish industry in British Columbia, particularly things like summer mortality. And so this was a really great opportunity to really connect the creators and the end users of OA data. So it was sort of half industry attendees and half scientist attendees. And so there was a lot of sharing of information about current knowledge of oceanographic patterns, estimates of current and future marine carbon dioxide, things like known drivers of infectious disease, and some of the latest experimental work that's being conducted on shellfish species, particularly oysters. And so this was really a great way to strengthen some of those communications and that exchange of information. And it's something that we're hoping that we'll be able to continue in person someday post-COVID. We've also held a couple of webinars. So in January 2020, Patrick Duke, our student representative, hosted a MEOPAR webinar where he discussed some of the latest in ocean acidification sensor technology. And this is a really great resource. We've put it now on our YouTube channel and on our website, so I highly recommend checking this out. He basically walks through the pros and cons of different sensors and what you should think about in terms of needs for your particular project and monitoring efforts. So things like sensor drift, instrument accuracy, length of deployment, sensor capabilities, price points, that sort of thing. So really, really knowledgeable and really great resource. The other thing too is that we held a webinar last week. So this is going to be posted on our YouTube channel with Kristen Rutherford, who was a PhD candidate at the university, at Dalhousie University. And she shared some of her dissertation work looking at modeling carbon fluxes on the Scotian shelf, so Atlantic Canada, and it was really great and really informative. So that's now on our website and on our YouTube channel. Another past activity, something that we're kind of continuing to work on in a slightly modified way, is a catalog of research and infrastructure. So this is basically these catalog cards that are meant to be an accessible way for people to get a nice overview snapshot of all the various projects that are happening across the country, especially in their area, as well as contact information for the people leading these projects. So this catalog has changed slightly, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it's sort of a way of doing a more informal inventory of projects and OA knowledge across the country. I just want to add this here, within MEOPAR, we are not the only OA funded activity. There are several OA research projects that are also occurring. And if you want to learn any more about those, I highly recommend checking out MEOPAR's website. They just sort of redid their website and it looks really, really nice. So yeah, if you want to learn any more about some of these other ocean acidification research initiatives, you can check out those. We've featured a couple of the publications on our website, so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But yeah, so these are independent groups, but really important to note that MEOPAR is also funding other OA research activities. So now I'll just spend the rest of the talk talking about some of the new activities and the new things that we're working on, particularly in light of how we've had to pivot during COVID. So obviously with COVID, some of our activities, in-person activities in particular, are not possible yet. Hopefully soon in the future, we'll all be able to see each other again. But we thought that this was a good time and a good chance to kind of evaluate what we're doing and some of our activities. And I think one thing that COVID has shown all of us is that having online resources is really important, and it's a really great way for us to still connect across a broad country, especially because Canada is such a big country. So we're trying to develop new ways to engage our members, and the goals of some of these activities and this new communication plan that we're working on are to increase awareness and engagement of our members and within our community, to hopefully grow our audience and add more people to our community, and then as well to obviously identify knowledge gaps. That's always, you know, an important priority for our group. And so I'll spend the rest of the talk just talking about some of these new online resources and content that we've been creating to help supplement our things like our website during a COVID world and have more online activity. So the first thing I want to talk about is our ocean acidification map of Canada's OA resources. So this is how we've sort of taken our catalog and pivoted it into something that's not necessarily a formal inventory, but more of an accessible tool for particularly those end users of OA data and research. So basically this map, it's got a bunch of pins everywhere across the country, and you can look for things like projects, people, and facilities and infrastructure across the country to see what's happening in your area and what knowledge is being created. So this is what this map looks like. It's just made using Google My Maps because it's a free, accessible tool that most people are familiar with. And so you can see we've got tons and tons of pins, especially in coastal regions. So what you can do is you can either click through all the pins, scroll down, see through them. You can also click through the layers. We've got things broken out into 3 different categories. And so for each pin, if you click on it, there'll be a list of resources related to that. And usually that's in the form of a link. So the other nice thing about this map is it allows us to keep everything constantly up to date, because basically you'll click on this link and it'll bring you to our website, and it'll have an updated list of all the resources that we've gathered for that particular item. And then within each pin on the map, if you click on them, not only will it have this link, but it will also have a huge list of keywords. And this is to make our map a little bit more searchable. So you can use the search feature and you can look for, let's say, lobsters, and it'll bring up all the pins that have the keyword lobster included in the description. The other thing too is because it's Google, it'll bring up Google results, search results as well. And sometimes these aren't relevant, but there is that possibility too, if people are interested in looking for more information. So hopefully this is really useful for people. We're constantly updating it, and if you have items to add, please let me know. I'll provide my contact information in a second here. One other thing that we're doing is we're creating a new blog series. So we've got 4 new blogs that we have created. We launched this in December. And this is again to just sort of build our content, add to our map, and create some more accessible materials for online resources, particularly given COVID. So the first of these blog series is called OA News You Could Use, and I post these every Thursday morning, and it's just a quick little news update of what's happening, the latest in OA news across the world and across the country. So I like to include about 3 to 5 items. So if we've got anything new we've put on our website, like a new blog post or something, I'll include that. If there have been upcoming events or recent events, I'll include those. So as well, you can see I'll put recordings too of past webinars or upcoming webinars. And then I always like to include an educational resource, especially for educators, teachers. I try and include educational OA resource as well as a news item, typically Canadian news items, but anything that's relevant I will include. And then I always like to include a research item as well. So if there's been a new paper that's published, I will include that as well. So everyone can kind of come on Thursday mornings and get your phone and spend 5 minutes to look at sort of some of these new updates in terms of OA news across the world. And the idea with this is it's very much a service that we provide, and we hope people will then come to our website and click on our other links to see what other resources we have. So we really hope that it will continue to drive traffic to our website. Another blog series that we're working on is called Scientist Spotlights. And this we do about once a month, where it's basically a Q&A with researchers. And it's meant to be sort of a more informal conversation to get people's backgrounds and research interests in ocean acidification and why they think OA is important to Canada and beyond. So it's been really interesting, and it's nice to have these more informal conversations with people. And in particular, I try and target early career researchers for these interviews because we want this to be mutually beneficial. And we want to provide a platform for young researchers to get their names out there and showcase their research. So as much as possible, I try and target early career individuals, but it's been really great to learn about all the different perspectives that people bring to OA research across the country. We also have a similar blog series. It's another Q&A interview style blog series called Research Recaps. This is similar, but it's more targeted in that it's typically a new research item that's come out. So for example, a new publication. So we'll interview the authors of that publication. Again, typically I like to target early career people as much as possible so that it helps them get their research out there and provide a platform for them. And the thing that I like about this series is that it is really accessible language. So, everybody can look at these and kind of get a glimpse into how the scientific process works. So I ask questions like, did you find anything unexpected? What surprised you most about the outcomes of your research? So it really kind of puts into perspective some of these, how the scientific method works and how some of these research products come to be. A little bit more infrequently, we're also doing a blog series called Meet the COP. So it's similar to our Scientist Spotlights. Again, it's just an interview Q&A where we get to know people and their research interests and backgrounds in ocean acidification, but specifically we target the community of practice leadership. So it's one of the great outcomes of this series, I think, is that it's really been inspiring and to learn about people's motivations for why they think ocean acidification is important and why the community of practice is beneficial. And why it matters to them. So it's really been great to learn people's perspectives. We're also trying some live interviews with some of these posts. So again, you can check out, we did a little interview with Brent that's about 12 minutes long. So yeah, you can check that out on our YouTube channel as well. So for blog posts, it's not just these 4 series. We can do custom pieces as well. So for example, we did a really interesting interview with a couple of scientists at the Hackeye Institute where we learned about some of the collaborative OA research that they're doing, combining different fields of science. So it's been really great and really interesting to learn about these different perspectives. And so we're hoping to kind of develop these blog posts, and they don't necessarily have to be within these categories. So stay tuned for more. And if you want to contribute, we'd love to hear your ideas. So if you want to be featured or if you have an idea, we're always looking for content and we would be so happy to hear from you. Again, yeah, we can do any of these posts. We can customize posts. So my contact information is coordinator@oceanacidification.ca. And yeah, we'd love to showcase your research and hear more from you. Other things that we're doing, we're updating the website. So we're reorganizing some stuff. We've put a lot of focus on our map of ocean acidification resources. We're creating some new static pages and resources, as well as we're trying to translate our website into French for our French colleagues. So again, if you have ideas or things that you want to see on our website, this is very much a work in progress, so we love to hear feedback. One other thing I'll touch on is our membership. Just so if you're interested in wanting to get involved, you can check out, we've created a new membership list, oceanacidification.ca/join-us, and you can sign up. Here, it's really easy. It's just your email and your name. So from that, I just did a quick little look at from our people's email addresses. This is by no means a formal survey of our members, but just looking at people's email addresses, I did a little quick breakdown of our members, so you can actually see how many groups are involved within our community. So we have people from government and academia, mostly scientists and researchers, but as well we have a large portion of industry members. So again, these are our end users of OA data and knowledge. We also have members from international OA groups, so even if you don't live in Canada, you're more than welcome to join. Oops. We also have people from NGOs. I like to include students here just so you can see that we do have that early career perspective in our membership. There's also lots of people from MEOPAR that have joined, and we also have several Indigenous community leaders from both Canada and the US. And the great thing about our membership is, well, first is always free because again, we're just a service. But the great thing about our new membership list is that we've actually captured a bunch of new people. I mentioned earlier that originally it was by invitation, and having this membership list and having people being able to add themselves, we've captured about 45 new people that weren't necessarily invited. So again, everyone is welcome, and we're really happy to have everybody's perspective. So we're really happy to see people adding themselves to our membership list. For anyone who is involved with this community building, I always like to talk about social media. I know it's not necessarily everyone's favorite thing, but it is a very powerful tool we've discovered. So since about October, we've been increasing our online presence and content. We put lots of our new blog posts, and we will put updates to our website on social media. You can see here that our Facebook membership hasn't really increased, and we see very, very low engagement on our Facebook page. So probably not the most useful tool for us, but we'll continue to use it. In terms of Instagram, I make lots of nice images. I showed some of those images for our blog posts, and I'll post those on Instagram, nice visual graphics. And so we've seen a lot of increased engagement and followers, but not necessarily a lot of engagement on our actual website. But the interesting and important thing here is you can see that our Twitter following has almost tripled since October. And this is actually, since October, Twitter has been the second largest source of traffic to our website. So people seem to be engaging, they're clicking on our posts, our blog posts, and they're coming to our website from Twitter and then exploring our website. So if you're doing outreach, education, anything like that, Twitter seems like it's a useful tool for community building. So I'll just touch really quickly going forward a few of the activities that we have planned for the future. First of all, I'll mention our Coast to Coast OA sensor package. This is, again, an initiative to try and make connections between creating OA data and working with end users of OA data. So we're hoping to collaborate with aquaculture operators, put some sensor packages out in their areas, and allow them to help determine and predict impacts, OA impacts, as well as allow us to contribute to some of those larger monitoring efforts. The other thing that we're hoping, an outcome of this sensor package, is that we want to compare sensor performance. So many of the well-established existing sensors are very expensive, and so that can be cost prohibitive, especially to individual aquaculture operators. And so we want to test the performance and compare the performance of these existing well-established sensors with some of the new emerging lower cost OA sensors that are coming out. Another thing too is that we actually have an engineering summer student who is joining us this summer to help build some wireless devices and communication sensors for our sensors. So we're excited to have them on board. Briefly, I'll mention too that we're working towards doing some vulnerability assessments. So these are species and community assessments where we hope to incorporate biological, physical, as well as socioeconomic data and indicators. And the goals of these vulnerability assessments are hopefully to facilitate regional priorities and action plans. And we've had some benefits from collaborating, particularly with DFO and NOAA, because this will help with looking at shared regions and common species of interest. So if you're thinking about commercially important species that might be at risk from OA, this will be a great way for us to collaborate. And so we've had some great discussions about that so far. There was also a recent workshop, I'm not sure if anybody here attended, but the OA Alliance held a really great workshop on how to conduct vulnerability assessments. And we heard some examples of all the different kinds of data and methodology that you can use when conducting these vulnerability assessments. So that's been a really useful resource for our group. Really briefly, just a few other things that we're working on. We're sending invitations out to new members, and we're hoping again that this new membership list will allow us to capture people. You can add yourself. We're also working towards building a database of resources, hopefully as well as people. So looking at a lot of publications and metadata that we're hopefully going to organize and make available in the near future here. We're also working on some upcoming webinars and workshops in collaboration with some other groups. So hopefully we'll have some more material that will be coming out in the next few months here. The other big thing too that we're working on right now is a white paper. So we're doing an overview of the state of OA knowledge across Canada. And so this includes, we're looking at metadata, species data, monitoring data, as well as modeling data. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have something out in the future for you. As well too, I'll just end with that we're working always to continue collaborations with the larger ocean acidification groups. So again, we try and be connected into this larger global conversation. So again, we post a lot of stuff on Team Canada for the OA Information Exchange. We're hopefully doing some work with the OA Alliance to help bring in some of our Canadian groups that have joined the OA Alliance. As well too, we're involved with the GOA-ON North American Regional Hub. Again, we're hoping to have a meeting here in the near future. So if for those of you that might be listening, hopefully we will see you all then. And with that, I would just like to say thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you as well to our steering committee and our co-leads, as well to everyone at GoOn and Mike in particular for helping us and inviting us to participate in this speaker series. And with that, I'm just going to put up this last slide here that's got some information. And I think if there's time, I will take some questions.
Hi, Kristina, excellent job. Thank you for that wonderful presentation.
Thanks.